the Lee County High Mosquito Control District. Wayne Miller, director of the district, wrote the Articles of Incorporation and was the first president. The second president was Will Dryden, also a district commissioner. The district obviously has long been a supporter of the society, and in that vein, I would like to recognize members of the current board that are here today. And if they'll kind of wave and nod when I mention their names. Mr. Thane Beeler.
They better stand up.
There you go. Well, can you see over here? They're mostly congregated here on this side of the room. Thane Beeler, thank you. And his wife, Darlene. I'd like to also point out this time, I asked the restaurant staff if they could remove this partition. They said it's supporting the whole it's still here today, I'm sorry. Mr. Paul Sanborn, his wife Mildred. Paul, over here, green shirt. Mr. John Cantinas and his wife Bella. Mr. Pat Mann and Jenna. Mr. Joe Burgess. Joe. Mr. Ken Sani and his wife Peach. And the chairman of the board, Mr. Rick Pritchett and his wife Lynn. And the director, Mr. Bill Opp and his wife Elaine. There you go, that's the current board. I'd like to invite Mr. Pritchett, chairman of the board, up to the lectern just to say hi to everyone. Rick?
On behalf of the Lee County High School Patrol, we wanted to welcome everyone from the society to Lee County and beautiful Useppa Island. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, Don. It's a very great honor to be able to be here and meet some of the founding fathers and visit with them and meet many of the past presidents. We appreciate everyone for attending. It's been a very pleasant gathering so far. The early folks in this society should be very proud of what they established, and all the hard work is very appreciated for getting this society off the ground and maintained itself as still a viable society for 37 years. I'd like to give a round of applause to those founding fathers. Really is appreciated, and also the hard work and the efforts of all the past presidents that have kept things going. There are a lot of other longtime friends here of the society, and we take it very seriously. We're very appreciative, and I'm personally very proud to be a part of it. Looking forward to another 37 years. Also, I'd like to take just a second to thank the Doggets for putting these arrangements together. I'm going to keep the rest of it short. I'm just going to introduce the rest of the current officers in the board, and then I'll turn things over to Dr. Howard. So when I call your name, if you can either stand up or just wave your hand and let people know who you are. Those of you that are here, the president-elect this year is Dr. Allison Fox. Vice President Dr. Dave Spencer. Treasurer, who's outgoing this year but done a great job. Randall Stocker. Secretary Wendy Andrew. Another officer that's going off this year, the longtime editor, Dr. Bill Howard. He's going off. Terry McNabb is our immediate past president. Terry was not able to join us today. Directors, we have Mr. Louis DeSalle, Mr. Joe Stevenson, and we have Mr. Ken Manuel. Ken. Our other two directors, David Carver and Stratford Kay, were not able to join us. So, again, we appreciate it. Hope all of you that are here today can make it and join us some for the next couple of days over at the meeting. We've got a pretty good program lined up, and the presidential suite is number 973. It's open every night, so stop by and say hello. Now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Bill Howard.
I've been involved with society. Why me? I've been involved in it. My first meeting was in Tampa in 1971. I was a very young student at that time. I met some very interesting people. Their names are T. Wayne Miller, Herb Friedman, and so forth. A good group of folks, and they got me stimulated in aquatic plants and knew a lot of research had to be done. Then I went on and met some other fine people, Bob Blackburn, Dave Sutton, and the people are listed in this book, and the people are sitting around here. Had a lot to do with the course of my life, and I just appreciate the opportunity to be here and lead this session. I think probably one of the first things we should do is recognize the fact that some mighty important and fine people have passed on before us, and I'd like to have Wendy Andrew read the names of the party members. We'll just be silent.
Can you hear me from here? William Bill Dryden, founding member and second president. Edwin L. Seabrook, founding member. Zeb Grant, 5th president. Stan Abramson, 10th president. Bob Gates, 11th president and honorary member. Lou Guerra, 14th president and honorary member. Roy Clark, 21st president. Maxine Gowan, 24th president and honorary member. Bill Wunderlich, honorary member. F.L. Timmons, honorary member. Walter Dunn, honorary member. And Gloria Rushing, President's Award recipient.
Okay, thank you, Wendy.
Again.
Hey, Bill, I can subtract and end over that
far, you're not that much younger. My father just bought a new hay baler, and we were real pleased about it. And we put up 20,000 bales of hay that year, and we sold our 2-year-old heifers for $85 a piece. So that kind of, I don't know what the price of a loaf of bread was, but that was back 2 years ago. A lot of water over the dam. I'm going to take this group, this document here we put together, and if there's major errors in it, and I'm sure there are, I'm responsible. Get me any corrections in, please. We'll try and update them over the years. But I'd like to go down through the list here and have each of the members that are here maybe reminisce for a second or two as to what was going on and what they remember about the years that they were president or a founding member, how they acted in the society. 1961, on July 19th, John Kennedy was president. During that same year, he created a Peace Corps. The Bay of Pigs invasion occurred, and it was already spoken to by Barbara, and the Berlin Wall was started. Now, the first man in space was named who? Yuri Gagarin. You wrote this list, so you don't play anymore. As we sit here and watch the moon shots, the tremendous pictures coming back from Mars, we find out that in 1961 was the first person in space, so it's been a tremendous amount of progress. Yuri Gagarin was the first man in space. The most popular song in 1961 was Moon River. The most popular movie was West Side Story. The first person on our list is T. Wayne Miller, and I've been advised not to let him speak for a minute or two at this point. because he has a spot later in the program. So the next person that's on our list is Mr. Herb Friedman, and I don't want to introduce them. They're all here on your sheet of paper. Herb, what do you recall of 1961 when you got real active in the organization?
Well, all I can say is being the first secretary-treasurer of this organization may have sounded like a difficult job, but it really wasn't, because there weren't that many members of the association. Besides, Wayne Miller did practically everything. It was enjoyable, it was fun, and I met a group of people that I had previous connections with. We were all cooperative, and we had the idea of making this organization into something that would last for a long time. And it certainly has proven what we all try to do. And, any more that I can say would only be a reflection on taking anything away from Mr. Wayne Miller, who was the granddaddy, the daddy, and mother of this organization. He's the man who made it go. I was in second place, and that's where I preferred to be. Not that I could have done anything about it. It's a pleasure to be here today and see how this organization has progressed in the years.
Thank you. Riding over on the boat, had the opportunity to ride with Oscar Schultz, of all people, and his wife, the former Miss McWilliams. If you read the write-up on him, you'll find out that he's had a lot of experience in the mosquito control business, and his wife, of course, family was involved in it. But I found out how it was all done back then. In the 30s and 40s, when something had to be done to form a mosquito control district over in the St. Lucie, Indian River County area, they'd take the train. And they had to take the train from St. Lucie, Vero Beach, right up to Jacksonville, change trains, and then go on over to Tallahassee. My question to Oscar was, why don't you just take the turnpike? Well, obviously, it wasn't there. And that's where all the politicians rode, was on the train, so he said that there was more politics that got done on the train between South Florida and Tallahassee than ever got done in Tallahassee. Oscar, some of your reflections, if you can.
I'll just stay here if everybody can hear me.
Great.
No, Oscar.
Okay, good.
Can you get through here? Well, it's great to be back at Useppa Island. It's just as lovely today as it was back in 1961. It's really a nice place, and it's great that you're having this meeting here. I was very happy to see this organization come about, and as most of you I'm sure know, it was originally called the Hyacinth Control Society, and that was our target weed. I was a brand new mosquito control director in Imperial Cook County, and right away when I got on the job, they decided I would have to take over hyacinth control as well in an operation they call Waterways Improvement. And not knowing anything about aquatic weeds and their control, I was desperate to find out through an organization that was being organized. And many thanks to Wayne and Herb Friedman and others, this organization came about, and I was able to do a little bit better in trying to control weeds. But it's a pleasure to be here. I remember when we had our meeting here, I think we met business-wise over on the other side, had meals here, and we stayed in the cottages down the way. And if I'm not mistaken, we were here 2 nights. Wayne had conveniently had the area sprayed to control mosquitoes. And on the way here to the island, coming off the boat, Dan Gorman and I were talking about how we stood outside the cottages over here that evening and discussing issues that happen to meetings like this. And suddenly we decided it would be better to go inside the building. And there was mystery mosquitoes. They flew in from somewhere else. But again, it's a pleasure being here, and I'm looking forward to what Wayne has to say, because he's really the granddaddy of the organization and has a history well in tow here. So thanks again for inviting me. It's a pleasure. I live in Savannah, Georgia, and retired mosquito director for that program in Chatham County. But it's always a pleasure to come back to Florida and visit. And again, thanks for the invitation. It's just great being here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Oscar. We'll move on now into the presidents. And the first president that we're going to ask to comment a little further is Dan Gorman. And Dan is an honorary member as well as our president. And he, Dan, you got, what were some of your early memories? You were part of this original crowd. Maybe you were here, a part of that charter at that first meeting as well. The first meeting they had, only 7 people really signed the Articles of Incorporation, but there were somewhere between 25 and 30 people here at that time. Okay, what else? 31. Okay.
No, I think there was only about 13 or 14 men, and there were a number of very beautiful, gracious ladies. And William has provided corsages for the ladies with a very beautiful, very fragile purple flower. And Oscar Wright, we stood outside for just a few minutes and got into a discussion. We decided it wasn't worth standing out there and swatting and slapping, so we retired very quickly there. I had the opportunity to serve the society as secretary-treasurer for 3 or 4 years, some of the early meetings in Tampa, Lakeland, and Tallahassee. And in those days, a Holiday Inn or a motel was large. I had a large enough meeting room to accommodate our group. We had some real good times. We had a lot of outdoor functions on Monday evening there, barbecues, and I remember the game commission there preparing swamp cabbage salad. A real good time. I'm very proud that I've had an opportunity to be a part of the organization and have served, and I feel it's a very great organization and just enjoy it very much.
Okay, thank you, Dan. That kind of, we skipped over a lot of presidents there for obvious reasons. And I'd like to bring you up to date on some of the history that's occurred at that particular time. For example, in 1962, that meeting was at the Governor's Club in Fort Lauderdale. Wayne Miller was the first president, and it was the first meeting that John Gallagher attended. Okay, in 1962, John Gallagher attended that one. That was the year that a book was published called Silent Spring, and the popular television series was The Beverly Hillbillies. 1963, of course, we all remember that John Kennedy was assassinated. The Martin Luther King I Have a Dream speech, and the Beatles appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show. 1964, the Surgeon General warns us that cigarettes may not be good for our health. Another interesting thing happened that nobody paid much attention to, and integrated circuits were patented in 1964. I wonder why they became important. In 1965, Bill Howard graduated high school. Volkswagen Beetle sold for $1,500, and I still got it. And the miniskirt was developed, and it was wonderful. And draft resistors were fleeing to Canada. We were active in Vietnam. National Organization Women was founded. And Hong Kong flu invaded the United States. All right, our next president, we had a meeting at the Langford Hotel. We've met at that particular location twice. We've met at 2 or 3 locations twice. 1968, Bob Blackburn was our president. The USS Pueblo was seized by North Korea. Martin Luther King was assassinated. Robert Kennedy was assassinated. The Soviets invaded Prague, Czechoslovakia. The riots at the Chicago Democratic National Committee. Nixon beat Hubert Humphrey, and David Sutton arrived in Fort Lauderdale. Bob Blackburn, you were at that original meeting here, I believe, and your comments would be greatly appreciated.
Well, almost anything I can say to take something away from Wayne. Almost anything I can say will take something away from what Wayne has to say. I would say that I enjoyed the first meeting over here. Back in February, previous to this meeting, I had the opportunity to meet Wayne Miller at the Weak Science Society of America. And after that meeting, I almost got fired from my boss because Wayne had met with, if you know Bill Ennis, Wayne had met with Bill Ennis, and Bill Ennis didn't waste 5 minutes getting over to talk to Bob Blackburn about what Wayne Miller had said about forming a society. So, while we were here, one of the things that I brought up at this meeting here, and I remember it very plain to Wayne, I asked him, I said, Wayne, how can a new society get off the ground? Who's going to support this society? And Wayne says, don't you worry about it, the mosquito control will take care of it. So for the next 5 years, that's about what happened. Our registration would be 80 people, be 40 guys and 40 women. But we had a great society, we had some of the greatest times, and out of that, I think came what you have here. I'm sure Wayne is going to get into the controversy that he and I had about the change of the name of the society. I don't want to get into that, but I spent many hours in the Fort Lauderdale airport arguing with Wayne that this society needs to have a name change. And he'll get into that, I'm sure. So thank you.
And then Bob was on my committee when I went through graduate school. Dave Sutton was the chairman, so that education's passed down through. And I don't know, I learned a whole lot. I guess I did. And I hopefully passed it on to some other people that are here who have done degrees under my direction. So if you looked at that southern tree, your family tree, there's not a whole lot of branches on it from the research side. And there's a lot of the people responsible for that right in this room. Again, a lot of the direction of my life has come from the people in this room. As Bob had said. And Bob Blackburn and Rob Wellman certainly contributed a whole lot to research in the field of aquatics. Yes, I'm sure. Don Seaman, we did locate him, another honorary member. He's in Chico, California, retired. And the first thing he said to me on the telephone, he says, "My God, I almost got fired when I signed them papers." Seaman's an email nut, so if you like to do an email, get with him. But he said that he was sent over here, I presume with Bob, to sabotage, find out what was going on and sabotage the organization. Because WSSA did not want a separate aquatics group. And Seaman says, "My God, I ended up signing the Articles of Incorporation," and he said, "I got transferred to California a year later." But he still laughs about it, and he wishes he could be here, sincerely does. Okay, our next year is 1969. On June 1969, Bill Haller arrives in Gainesville, Florida to start a degree. The Bureau of Aquatic Plants, or DNR, was formed. And this organization, the Old Hyacinth Society, was really fighting to get a statewide program going, and I think they took a lot of train rides with politicians, and things got done. But DNR was formed. Burkhalter arrived shortly thereafter. We'll let him speak to that later. If you remember, airplane hijacking was a big problem in 1969. There were 65 airplanes hijacked in 1969 worldwide. And Ted Kennedy drove off a bridge and got in trouble. And Armstrong was the first person on the moon. The big show on television was Laughing. Our president was Frank Wilson of Imperial Polk County in that particular year. Frank is still doing consulting work in mosquito control, and he couldn't be with us for the meeting and certainly regrets it. And while we're talking about Imperial Polk County, the longer and the more I've been in Florida, I really wondered why it's Imperial Polk County. I still think it ought to be Imperial Lee County because it seems like all the action's right here. 1970, a man named Paul Collier was our president, and we took the first step outside of Florida and went to Huntsville, Alabama. Another thing that happened, Nixon was president at that time of the United States, not APMS. Nixon was president of the United States. An EPA was formed. Voting age was reduced to 18, and the students were killed at Kent State due to protesting the Vietnam situation. Paul Collier, we lost totally. We couldn't find him. And we went through computer directories, nationwide telephone directories, finally wrote to Hercules Powder Company. Paul Collier is in Wetumpka, Alabama. He's very healthy, but has a family reunion this weekend, otherwise he would be here. Paul was our president in Huntsville, Alabama in 1970. Stan Abramson, now here's the first APMS meeting I went to. Stan Abramson was president, okay, the 10th president of the Tampa meeting. And you remember that, Herb? Right. Yes. We had a grass carp on display in an aquarium. Dave Sutton brought him down. I kind of babysat for him. DDT use that year was outlawed. The United States was pulling out of Vietnam. Greenpeace was formed in Vancouver, British Columbia. All in the Family was popular on TV. And it was the first time that we ever had a meeting with a major fish kill going on in the river right behind the hotel. And it's the first time due to red tide. And what was even better was we had an evening boat ride scheduled on that river. And we went. And we had a great time. Bob Gates was our president in 1972. My meeting was in Miami Springs. That was the year that EPA passed FIFRA. Nixon visited China. And it was the issue of the Last Life magazine in 1972. And there were also 5 men that decided to break into Watergate Hotel in Washington, D.C. We didn't know what it was all going to mean, but that's what happened that year. Bob Gates was the Water Management District and became honorary member later on. In 1973, the Endangered Species Act was enacted upon, the Alaskan Pipeline was started, American troops were coming out of Vietnam, and digital watches were first developed and were very expensive, averaging $200, $250 a piece. And Brant Watson became our 12th president, and our meeting was at the New Orleans Monteleone. Brant, if you'd like to comment, please. While Brant's walking up here, Louis DeSalle, where were you on July 19th, 1961?
I was, you better check with her.
I had just come out of the Navy and gone back to college and finished up and moved to Vicksburg, Mississippi to start my first job.
Just moved to Vicksburg, that's a good answer. Brant?
No complaint.
Okay. That means, can everybody hear me? Yes. Okay, I'll talk later. I think I was the 13th president. Actually, in fact, I was pleased about it because I was born on the 13th, which I considered a lucky thing. So anyway, it was the second time that we went out of the state. And there was still a lot of criticism and fighting back and forth about whether we should go out of the state or not, but we did. And we had a great time. Fortunately, Wayne Miller was my secretary treasurer, so everything ran smoothly on that level. We were in the Hotel Monteleone right down in the French Quarters. Even though I had a presidential suite, I didn't have too many people there because most of them were down checking out the French Quarter. And it was my first experience with a bidet. I thought that was rather interesting.
That's what he was.
Also, we had Ray Baum, who was our featured speaker, I guess you'd say. He was a fellow from Argentina. I think he was the assistant secretary of something down there. And I remember that my wife never knew that he was a comedian until the end of the thing. She was so mad, she almost got up and kicked Wayne in the ankle a couple of times when he said bad things about him, but at least that's what she thought. But she was pleased to find out that at the end that he really was a comedian and they weren't really making fun of him. And she also, along with Alva Burkhalter's wife, explained to this fellow what grits mean. And you'd be surprised how complicated that was. Anyway, I had a great year. Thank you.
Dan was reminding me, or telling me, that was the first year that people outside the state of Florida could be on the board of directors. So that year, let's go to the back pages if you would, and let's explain this president and how he got out of order. The very first meeting, July 1961, at the Boca Grande Club, or the Useppa Island Club here. That was the first meeting, and Mr. Chipley, we considered him as a chairman at that time. We never really called him president. So really, T. Wayne Miller, the second meeting, which was held at the Governor's Club, Fort Lauderdale, was the second meeting, and T. Wayne was the first president. So that's why my numbers may jive with yours. So we're having, for example, this year, we're having our 37th meeting, and because Mr. Chipley, during the first meeting was chairman, Kurt Getzinger's our 36th president, it's your welcome. All right, now we got another problem. Brant was a former Florida Gator graduate. I'm a Florida Gator graduate. And now we deal with this Auburn situation. Our next president, in 1974, was Alva P. Burkhalter. He presides over the second meeting at the Langford Hotel. Bill Haller earned his PhD. There were gas lines because of shortages. California went to an odd, even license plate number due to gas shortages. Patty Hearst was kidnapped by the SLA. TV movie was Kojak, and the big movie was Chinatown. Alva, can you follow up on some of this? And by the way, Auburn, if you look at the presidents and so forth, Auburn outnumbers the Gators 4-2. We'll change that.
Well, the biggest thing I remember is probably about society, particularly at that time, was that it was going through quite a turmoil as far as whether to become an international society or be a state society. And I was, of course, right in the middle of that turmoil. And I think basically at that time what happened was very soon after that, the Florida Group formed, which was really one of the first chapters with the society. We kind of split off and said, okay, this will be the international society, and the other will be one of the first local chapters. As far as working with DNR and working with this group, I can remember there's two things. Probably from a personal standpoint, which was the most rewarding time of my life, as far as the 10 years I spent here. From a financial standpoint, it was devastating. About the biggest contribution I felt like I left to this society was, like Bill said, he was finishing up his degree that year. He wanted to go back and milk cows in upstate New York. I think, and I want to make doggone sure he didn't go back up to New York State and milk cows. So when he graduated, I tried to just load him down with every project I could think of. He had money running out of his ears. In fact, he probably was the student that graduated the University of Florida that had the most grants before he ever graduated. So at least I kept him around.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Mike. Yeah, in fact, the university didn't know what the heck to do with me. University's not wanting to turn down any grant money or outside funds, and Al's keep giving me these projects to work on, and I keep signing the papers, you know, and there's something you learn in a bureaucracy. You'll keep signing and doing things until somebody says, hell, you can't do that. Well, finally they come along and said, actually it was in June of 1974, they said, Howard, you can't do this. I said, I've been doing it for 3 years. They said, you can't do it. Board of Regents, I mean, they just can't do this. You cannot sign grants and be a principal investigator and handle state and university money. I said, well, what's the option? He says, well, we have to turn the money back. Or you could get your PhD degree. And so, the rest is history. So you see how everything is tied in here. Actually, I did write a thesis and do some.
Very hurriedly, as I recall.
Yeah, very hurriedly.
Little money wouldn't return.
All right, and of course, Al, we always get together and talk, and he stole my line. It's my next was talking about the APMS chapter. But let's go to 1975. Jimmy Hotspot disappeared. We don't know where he went to. Still haven't found him. Saigon goes communist. Bruce Springsteen is on the cover of Time and Newsweek. TV shows are Saturday Night Live. Jaws is a big movie, and Lou Guerra, bless his soul, he was our 14th president in San Antonio. Had a great meeting there. In 1976, we did. It was a tough time. We changed our name to the Aquatic Plant Management Society at the Fort Lauderdale meeting. That year was in the Bahia Mar, I believe. Shortly after that meeting, or that same time, a group met over at the Old Plantation Water Control District, and they formed the Florida chapter to get more involvement of the applicators. And as things turn out, it's fine. There's a lot of hard feelings back at that time, but anyway, they got passed over. We celebrated our bicentennial. The Viking ship lands on Mars and sends back some still pictures. Carter Mondale become president, and Rocky Mountain High was the major song of that year. Roots was the book, and Ray Spurnock was our president. 1977, we had to. We moved out a little bit. Elvis reportedly dies in 1977. The son of Sam was captured. The U.S. Department of Transportation says we're going to have to mandate seatbelts by 1984. They have 7 years lead-in time, you know, they can't make a decision. Roots was on TV, watched by 36 million people. Star Wars was a big movie, and Dr. Robert Geiger was our president, and Bob is here while he's walking up. We had a little trouble finding him. We went through the personnel department with Howard Croce from DNR, and he's now living in Indianapolis, Indiana. Robert, and he was the president when we went to the hotel in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Hotel Sofitel. I can't say it. Robert.
Thanks. Bill Patterson was the head of the Aquatic program at 3M. Bill and I first came to the meeting. I think Bill's first meeting was in 1968. And my wife and 8-year-old son attended that meeting with me. We were real thrilled to join this group. It was a very enterprising scientific endeavor. We were very pleased to be part of it. I was a member of the board when they changed the name. It was a lot of fun. Part of the reason I left the society, no. I remember offering to have the meeting in Minneapolis at one of the board meetings. I said, where? Minneapolis, Minnesota. Where? At any rate, we held the meeting in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and in 1977. I had actually been out of aquatics for a couple of years, but 3M was the kind of company that wouldn't let you back down on commitment then. And So I had to put on the meeting and immediately was transferred to Indianapolis, Indiana, right thereafter. As usual, this meeting would not have come off without Wayne Moore's help. One key thing this meeting remember as of the meeting at which Wayne Moore's shoes were stolen.
Say it again.
Right, Wayne?
Wayne Miller's shoes were stolen.
Where's the problem? Anyway.
All right, thank you.
Finally.
All right, about 1977 is when Pensalt became Penwalt. Somewhere in there. And then Penwalt became El Faticam. So some people in the front were commenting, who is El Faticam? El Faticam was the new name for Penwalt, which was the new name for Pensalt. Okay? All right, and we'll recognize Eric and the folks a little later on. That was 1977. The meeting was in Minneapolis. Our next meeting was held in Jacksonville. Don Lee was the president. And the TVA was told they cannot build a dam because of the snail darter. That was 1978. And the stock market also took a major crash, went down 59 points to closing that week of 838 points. 1979, Julian Range was the president. The meeting was in Chattanooga Choo Choo, and Bill Haller learned a lot. Number one was don't leave graduate students in a room with a minibar. I paid tuition on that one. I'll be honest, Ken Langland, Bill Spencer, and some of these other guys were there and got a whole hotel or a whole car for them. And I'd come in late at night and I'd go for a beer at the minibar and there were none there. I says, good, they're not stocking it. Well, they were taking all the empty beer cans and they were hiding them, see? And I went to check out, it cost me about $350 more than I had. They were already on the road back. So there wasn't much I could do. Except I called my buddy Al Burkhalter and he bailed me out again.
Well, that was because I had that money left over from Lewis to sell that time.
Okay. Next meeting is in 1980. And U.S. boycotts the Moscow Olympics. The Cold War was at its really heated up stage, so bad that Mount St. Helens erupts. The Iran-Iraq war halts 60% of the oil flow. Reagan defeats Carter, and Bill Rushing presides over the Sarasota meeting. Bill?
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Glad to be here. You mentioned the snail darter. They find that son of a bitch all over the world, man. The first meeting I attended was 1972, when I guess Bob Gates was president. But I met two very significant people that year that I never had been in a society before, never knew about, didn't know anything about it. I was young and green and stupid and all that stuff. But I found somebody who took care of me, and that was Grant and Mimi Watson. They led me to the presidential suite and I found the free booth. And this is the place to be. I'm going to join this thing and see if I can't keep coming back. And I did. And I've been coming back and coming back and coming back. And as Bill said, I was president in 1980 in Sarasota. I think one of the things that I remember, one of the things that I remember is that the society was looking for an officer, but we were beginning to think about changing the way we were doing it, and rather than having a secretary and a treasurer, we were going to put it together, I don't know, all that stuff, you know that, talking about politics. Well, some people came to me, and I'm not naming any name, and asked me if I would be a part of this thing. And the way to do it was for me to be treasurer one year, and then to be elected secretary of treasury the following year. And you know, somehow it all worked. Just like that. And that's what they said was going to do, and it did. And so then I became secretary of treasury in 1981. and was secretary for 11 years. So let me warn you, if you ever get started doing that, something you never get out of it. But seriously, I'd like to say, just say this very briefly. It was the first major society of any significance that I ever joined, and it's been an education for me, and I've met some of the most wonderful people I've ever known in my life, and I really mean that. And one significant factor about this society that I really think is one of the most important things is that, and I noticed this that first meeting in Miami Springs, that it was composed, at least at that time, about 50-50 of professional scientists and so forth, and nozzle heads on the other side. And these people got along together, you know, and that was what was amazing. And I mean that. I really thought it was great, and it's still that way. There are a lot of practical people in the group, and in the society as a whole, as well as scientists. And I think that's one of the main attributes of this group. Thank you very much.
Okay, Bill, thank you. The society certainly has stretched out a little bit. In fact, at this meeting, we're expecting visitors from Brazil, visitors from Nigeria, and visitors from Fitchburg, Mississippi. In Jackson, Mississippi, 1981, there was a Reagan assassination attempt. AIDS first became known. There are 6 cases in Los Angeles. Prince Charles married Lady Di. IBM introduced a PC that nobody could afford. Mortgage rates were 17.1%. Movie was The Raiders of the Lost Ark, and Nelson Burton was president at our meeting in Jackson, Mississippi. Nelson?
The first thing I remember about the meeting, when I got to come to Jackson, and lo and behold, the good Lord blessed us with a lot of rain, and the meeting hall that we were meeting in happened to be underwater. I went down there and said, y'all want to get this thing rebuilt so we can have our meeting. They said, we'll try our best. So that, it's hard to realize it was 20 feet of water down there over where we met in 1971. I met some fine people, and they say everything goes back to Wayne, and he will get us right through what led us through this thing. And with Mr. old Lou Gary, he put life in me. And I think really when he started making his speeches, that's when everybody quit being so dull, sitting around there going to sleep and get up and trying to wake up people. Then you learn when you're the program chairman is who to put up where. Because you know about when somebody, how the people talk and who puts who to sleep, and then you get Wayne to come up there and kick somebody, and then Lou get up there and make a good speech. But I really enjoyed it. And thank you.
Thank you. Then we really branched out in 1982. Roy Clark with EPA was our president, and we went to Las Vegas at Caesar's Palace. And at that particular meeting is the first meeting I learned to shoot craps thanks to Herb Freeman. He really understands the game and does well. I didn't do well. In 1983, we met at the Lake Buena Vista, and Henry McKeithen was our president that year, and Congress had to rescue Social Security. Isn't it interesting how some of these things coming back? And Dow stopped the sale and manufacturing of 245T, and Continental and Eastern filed for bankruptcy. Now let me back up and Roy Clark's wife, please. I talked with Roy's wife. She's in Winter Haven, near Cypress Gardens. She wanted to come. She was going to come, and she got thinking about it. She says, you know, Roy and I, we had the greatest times of our lives with that meeting. And she says, I just don't think I can relive all that. So it was kind of hard for us. I said, don't worry, we'll catch you another time. So she does send her regrets for not being here and tells you that she loves everybody down here. In 1984, bank failures were common. The AIDS virus is identified, and somebody said that cholesterol has to be linked to cigarettes and heart disease. A song was born in the USA, and the movie was Indiana Jones, and we had our own Indiana Jones as president that year, Leon Bates.
Where does Indiana Jones bit come from, Bill? 61, I want to tell you what I was doing then. I was using the snail darter for bait to fish with. I did have 3 other events I wanted to share with you. One of them, I can recall very well, was the meeting in Huntsville when there was a question about why did we move out of state, that sort of thing. I was very enamored with the discussion that on there, especially since I had just learned to spell hyacinth. But it was very entertaining. I'm sure it might happen again some of you. But the other thing that I wanted to share with you, because I know so many of you have been influenced over the years by a fellow from Texas that says Texas in a special way. Luke Guerra, of course, influenced me early on to get involved with some committee work. You've heard the officers and others tell the younger people to get involved in the society as a committee member. And certainly that worked in my case. He got me on the hook and I stayed there. The other was something you all remember too, and that is over other department members, Max Gallo always said you did a fine job. You know, almost anything you did as a committee member or officer, you did a fine job. I'd screw up Roy. He said you did a fine job. But we sure miss those 2 people, and I know most of you have been influenced in some way with those 2 members. Thanks.
Thank you, Leon. In fact, the next year, Max was our 24th president, Max McCowan. Max worked with Eli Lilly, Elanco for many, many years. His wife Judy is here. Judy, you want to stand up and just wave your hand to those people who don't know Judy? Max died very unexpectedly a couple of years ago, actually 3 years ago now, after our meeting in San Antonio. And we have an award. Society has a Max C. McCowan Friendship Award, which is given to people who the board president feels very enthusiastic, outgoing, welcoming to new people, and so forth in the spirit of Max. So we do have an award named for Max.
Can I tell a quick Max story?
Yeah.
People don't seem so happy about it.
Yeah.
The Max McCowan. When I first met Max was when the APMS meeting was in Las Vegas. He's speaking to us. Meeting in Las Vegas, tour to Imperial Valley, Southern California, hotter than blazes, people on the bus getting off, sweating all over. We're on the canal bank, and I look around and Max is gone. So I kind of look back towards the bus, and Max was slumped up against the door of the bus. I mean, just kind of crumpled up. So I walked over and real quickly, he was kind of trying to hide in the shade. I said, Max, what happened? He said, well, I tried to get the bus driver's attention, but the bus driver, with the noise of the engine, didn't hear him beating on the door, and he was curled up. And I said, Max, you all right? Gonna be all right? And he says, yes, I believe so, but say, Randy, does it get considerably hotter than this in August?
All right, details, we're getting towards, we've got to move on. So everybody sign the guest book. We want this in the archives and the record. If you've not signed the guest book, raise your hand and we'll send it your way. Okay? Thanks a lot. No, don't leave it here to lose it, I'll leave it here. Okay. So that was 1985, that's when leaded gasoline was banned, Gorbachev leaves the USSR. The Rudman Act solves the federal budget deficit that we never deficit again. 1986, Challenger exploded over Cape Kennedy. Marcos leaves the Philippines and we find out that Imelda likes shoes. Chernobyl nuclear power plant happened to melt down. And Congress required all schools to evaluate whether asbestos is a hazard or not. And at that particular time, we had our meeting in Sarasota, our second meeting in Sarasota. Lars Anderson was president that year, our 25th president. Lars from California. A memorable meeting, that's the year that we had a meeting of APMS board members, and we had 2 bottles of wild turkey. It was a terrible.
I can't remember the papers from that one either. That's an auspicious year because that's the first official year that the Californian and Western invasion occurred on board as officers. I got to tell you about that. If you open up your book here to the 1974 through 77, those folks are responsible for the California and Western invasion. Because my first meeting was in San Antonio, when Guerra was president. It was the strangest meeting I'd ever attended because I was going to plant physiology meetings and official academic meetings, and I saw Lou up there and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. But that started it because those four were responsible for getting me on the board. Eventually, it's about Western, and who's been managing until here since the last 3 or 4 years? Randall from the West. It was part of the baby, so watch out and see Men in Black. It's a great movie.
1987, the stock market makes a major crash again in October. Gorbachev announces glasnost and perestroika. Dean Martin was our president that year. The meeting was in Savannah. A wonderful meeting. That's the first time I met Oscar Fultz. Is Dean Martin? They thought he was going to be here. Not here. Okay. Richard Comas chaired the meeting at the New Orleans Mausoleum, the second time we went there in 27th President, 1988. We heard about global warming. We heard about a federal drug czar being formed to solve all of our drug problems. Bush beats Dukakis, and the big movie, or the big TV is Miami Vice, and the movie is Rain Man. 1989, Richard Couch, our 28th president, had a meeting in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I still think the desert is hot. I don't care what you say. 120 degrees is hotter than 90 degrees in rain, I'm telling you. Exxon Valdez spilled a little bit of oil. USSR has free election and the Berlin Wall falls. So we're kind of recent history now. Come up with a past editor, the editor of Society for several years prior to me. A very close friend of mine, David Sutton out of Fort Lauderdale, was president that year. We had the meeting in Mobile, Alabama, a wonderful meeting that Joe Z did as local arrangements. That's the year that Iraq invades Kuwait, Germany were united, and there was an attempted overthrow of Gorbachev and the USSR. Dave? Comments?
Thanks, Bill. In 61, I was a junior in college. 64, I got married. 69, I came to Fort Lauderdale, met Bob, and history from then on. Working with everyone in here, it's a great group, and I'm going to leave it for Wayne. I don't care what Wayne says.
We are on schedule, and we will be hearing from Wayne real soon. 1991, Joe Joyce was at the Michigan meetings, and Richard Harriman was the local arrangements and really pulled that meeting together. Now understand, now in the late 80s and 90s, T. Wayne's not helping us, so we're having to learn to walk a little bit on our own. Desert Storm became a part of American vocabulary, Soviet Union fell apart, and Elizabeth Taylor got married for the 8th, and she promised last time. In 1992, our president was Randall Stocker out of California, of all places. He presided over the APMS International Symposium at Daytona Beach. We had that year about 225 people at the meeting, 250, about 50 people from overseas. Randall. Also that year, other than the national news of APMS having an international symposium, Tammy Faye Baker divorces Jim, and Madonna became the highest paid female entertainer ever.
I did have the good fortune to be president during the year at Daytona, which I believe was still the largest meeting that we've had, international meeting. And we all owe a certain amount to this organization. I owe a lot. I was at the Jackson meeting in 1981 when Lars Anderson stood up and said, anybody in this room be interested in working on a plant called hydrilla in Southern California. So my career has actually followed things that popped up at the APMS meetings, for which I am very grateful. That brought me even here today. Thanks.
Clark Hudson followed up the next year. We had a meeting in Charleston. It was a really great meeting. The bad news that year was Hurricane Andrew hit Florida. Clark sends his regrets he can't be here today. Moving up the line, 1994, we really had a, this is the bowl we will take over here now. We moved into Alabama. Joe Z, work your way up this way. And while he's on his way, there's two things that you should never do in a meeting. Bill Howard should never tell a joke, and Randy Socker should never sing. Did you hear the one about the two boll weevils that came out of Alabama? One of them went to Hollywood and really made a good life for herself, became very famous. The other boll weevil stayed in Alabama and really didn't do a whole lot, hung around the bar rooms, did a little bit of farming. And that weevil was called the lesser of two weevils.
1961, I was in the backyard playing and hadn't had to hear any Howard jokes at that time. I first joined the society in 1980. The first people I met at that meeting, Nelson Burton and Bill Rushing, I was very much influenced by them and decided to stay a part of it. In 1986, I was fortunate enough to be a part of what I would call the informal revolution of this organization when we quit having formal banquets. It occurred at the meeting. A lot of you know Derek Terry Goldsby. We threw several of the officers in the pool, and from that day forward, we had informal parties.
We stayed in the Southeast in 1995 and moved on up to South Carolina, and Steve D. Kozlowski became our president in 1995, same year that IBM and Lowe's pulled together. And Steve?
Well, I've been a member of the society for a number of years. My first meeting was the Sarasota meeting, and I think what really turned me on was watching Josie and Goldie running together arm in arm and diving into the pool. This is the kind of society I want to be a member of. I also found out when the request for volunteers went out, who wants to help out, and they were going to the Savannah meeting in Georgia. I said, well, that's kind of right across the border, let's help them out. And I found out who was really running the society, and that's Gloria Rushing at the time. And Gloria got me on the committee, and from there on, we just kind of cruised up through and became president. So it's been a wonderful experience for me. And this is the most appreciative bunch that I've ever been associated with as far as a professional organization. Thank you.
All right, we moved from the South End and moved up to Burlington, Vermont. Had our meeting in 1996 last year, wonderful time. The president, Terry McNabb, he really regrets he can't be here. In fact, he's doing some attending family matters right now. In the normal tradition of being a super person, a great get something done individual, he and his wife are in China adopting a child as we speak. So, super guy, super family. So Terry regrets he can't be here. 1997, we're here. I want to add that APMS has returned to Fort Myers. This is our third time that we've been here in our career. Chelsea is enrolled at Stanford. Mike Tyson bites off Holyfield here. More importantly, the Gators beat FSU and everybody else for the national title.
This is a good year.
Yeah, this is a good year. And we're down to our last president, we haven't mentioned, Kurt Getzinger. We've already heard from him. One other thing that some of the older members probably recognize for certain that we have the honorary members that we elect periodically. There's a couple new categories of awards in here. You'll see the President's Award. This was an award that the board of directors pulled together. Honorary member who had been involved with society for many years and retired. The President's Award we instituted when Dale Robeson retired out of England. He hadn't been a member of the society, but he contributed a lot, so we formed the President's Award. And Gloria Rushing and Dale Robeson were the two winners of that. It's not given very often. And then we started the new Max McCollum Friendship Award. I can say here, and I'm done now, I can say that I've been involved with society since 1971. I think I know the ideals and the way it started out that Dan and Oscar and Seabrook and the people put together and Herb. I think we know what to do. It's a Florida mentality. Get the job done, get out there and do it. That's what this group has always done. I appreciate being a part of it. And I now will turn it over to Wayne. Wayne, you can work your way up here. I asked for some information to introduce Wayne. They sent me 27 pages of material. And I said, there's no sense. Wayne Miller, everybody knows him, and I'm just going to say that I suspect that in a few years he'll be the next mayor of Fort Myers and be the best one in there.
Thank you, Will. Thank you, Bill, and thank you all. A number of the speakers have indicated to you they were waiting to hear what I had to say. Let me tell you, they made a bad assumption. It is a pleasure, truly, to be here and see old friends that I haven't seen for a very long time. A lot of familiar faces, a lot of new faces that we don't know. Mavis and I have not met everybody in the room, but stand up. My wife, those of you who don't know. And let me introduce you to somebody that many of you may not know. Marion Williams, stand up. Marion, were you here, Marion, in 61? Just Mel. She sent her husband down. Mel Williams was director of the mosquito control program in Sarasota County for many, many years and was one of the people here on Useppa when we put this thing together. Let me tell you that I'm really proud of this group. I truly am. I'm a little paternalistic, if you'll forgive me. I never doubted that this group was going to fill a real need. And I never doubted that it was not going to contribute good things to the membership. The Aquatic Plant Management Society was conceived as a mutual aid society. Oscar said he was in Polk County and he had aquatic weed work dumped in his lap and he didn't know what to do. Well, I can tell you right now, we didn't either. In 1960, Lee County had a major water hyacinth problem. Now, most of you may have seen this on an easel, but I don't know whether you paid attention to it or not. But it's out here. I'm going to pass it around a little bit. And let me tell you what that is. That's a 2-page spread in the Saturday Evening Post, dated November 1960. And what it says is the boats lie forlorn in the Caloosahatchee River at Fort Myers, Florida. Well, I don't know what a 2-page spread in Saturday Evening Post cost in 1960, but it was expensive advertising, and it was advertising that Lee County really didn't need. The people had gotten accustomed to essentially having to walk across the river on water hyacinths. They hadn't gotten used to reading about it in a national publication. So there were people, not me, who decided that there needed to be a program. At that time, in 1960, the only viable aquatic weed program in the state of Florida was Florida Game and Freshwater Fish Commission. They were operating out of Lakeland. They had a lot of airboats and a lot of people that would roam around the state. They had a statewide mission. And they put out 2,4-D to control water hyacinths. With a statewide mission, they were generally about 3 years behind all the time. And they let water hyacinths get to the proportion that you see in the Saturday Evening Post in Fort Myers. It was bad, and the only way you could get them to Fort Myers was to go to your legislator and get him to put pressure on the Game Commission to send the crews down here. Then they'd show up with 6 or 8 or 10 airboats, and they'd spend about 6 weeks spraying water hyacinths with 2,4-D in these big masses, and they'd all sink and breed blind mosquitoes. That's not a joke, right? The canned vegetable matter on the foot of the river produced blind mosquitoes like crazy. The legislative delegation approached me and said, look, we've got to do something with the water hyacinth program. Would you be willing to take it on if we give you the legislative authority to do it? And I truly was not enthusiastic about it. For one thing, I figured they'd want us to take our mosquito control money and spend it on water hyacinths. And the other was, I wasn't sure we could do it without authority to go out of the county up the Caloosahatchee River as far as Lake Okeechobee, some 50 miles. But the legislature agreed to those two things. They agreed to funding the program separately and to giving us authority to do work in the Caloosahatchee watershed upwards of 50 miles outside of the county. That let me sink water hyacinths in Hendry County rather than Lee and create the blind mosquito problem for them. This all happened pretty quickly. This picture was run in Saturday Evening Post in November of 1960. In the spring, the legislative delegation asked us to accept the responsibility, and we did ultimately do that. And all of a sudden, about June of 1961, we were faced with the responsibility of controlling, in our case, water hyacinths. Like Oscar, we had not the foggiest notion what to do. Didn't know who to go to, where to get the information. We simply didn't know, and we had to do something reasonably quickly. We knew we needed help, and we knew there must be people all over the United States that really knew what they were doing in this field. We just didn't know any of them. It wasn't possible for us to traipse all around the country seeking them out. And so we thought, well, the appropriate thing is to form a society to control aquatic weeds and let them come to us and bring with them the knowledge and the expertise and the know-how about how to control aquatic weeds. And it was just that simple. Will Dryden and I, a member of the board, went to Miami one day and we talked about it on the way down, and on the way back, about a 3-hour trip, we wrote the articles of incorporation and we wrote the bylaws for the Hyacinth Control Society. Now, let me tell you right now, because that became a bone of contention. We knew the first day that the Hyacinth Control Society was a bad choice. But there was an aquatic weed control society in the Midwest, I think in Wisconsin. And as far as we knew, you know, people weren't into picking out politically correct and lengthy names in the 1960s. It was weed control, we called it weed control. There was an aquatic weed control society, we couldn't be that. Our problem was water hyacinths, and understanding that we were limiting ourselves by the name, we chose the name, the Hyacinth Control Society. And we knew that it was time to involve others. The mosquito control district was digging ditches here on Useppa, mosquito control ditches. This was sort of a nice place. The island was owned by a fellow named Bill Snow from Macon, Georgia. Not much was over here. He was getting the island ready to have people in at the hotel. He was working on the golf course, and we were trying to get rid of the mosquitoes for him. And he said, hey, this is a great place. Why don't you be our guest? Come over and we'll host a meeting, and you can have your group over here. Well, this was a perfectly good place, and they were hospitable people, and so we called those people that we knew that were in the aquatic weed business. Called Oscar, called Ed Seabrook over in Palm Beach, Dan Gorman, Bob Blackburn and Lyle Weldon and Don Seaman were at the lab over in Fort Lauderdale. We knew that they should be involved. We got everybody together that we thought would have an immediate interest and would be willing to work. I don't know how many people were here. I've lost my list. Bob says he's got one. Herb says he's got one. I do not have one. There were about a dozen people who functioned as delegates, if you will. There were upwards of that many more wives. We had probably 20 people over here. After dinner, we went into the room over there where the bar is, and where the bar was then. And we had a meeting, and we made the pitch. We need a society to bring people together to share information about aquatic weeds. And people were generally enthusiastic. Bob Blackburn brought us a message from his organization over in Fort Lauderdale. And his message was, you people don't need to do this. The Weed Society of America is active and well. It's a big group. They're doing aquatic weed sessions. You don't need another society. Well, got a minute or two. Let me tell you an appropriate story. There's a fellow here in Lee County named Lloyd Hendry. He's the father of Mary Christine back over there against the window, and father father-in-law of Kenny Son, who is the newest member of the mosquito control board here. Lloyd tells a story. He says that at the turn of the century, people from the north would come into Jacksonville looking for ways to get to Fort Myers. They would ask in Jacksonville, how do you get to Fort Myers from here? And the message was, you can't get to Fort Myers from Jacksonville. There are no roads. The railroad only got to Orlando. There was no way to get to Fort Myers from Jacksonville. But if they took the train on down to Orlando, where the line ended, and they'd stop in Orlando and say, how do we get to Fort Myers from here? The people would say, you can't get to Fort Myers from here. There's no waterway, there's no train service. You can't get there from here. But if they persevered and they finally made their way to Punta Gorda, which is about 20 miles north of here, and they asked again, how do we get to Fort Myers? They got the same answer. There's no bridge across the Caloosahatchee River. You can't get to Fort Myers from Punta Gorda. And so that's how it came to be that Lee County filled up with people you can't tell anything. So Bob wasn't able to tell us anything. We heard what he said, but we didn't listen. As a matter of fact, we organized the Hyacinth Control Society here on Useppa Island. We had all the incorporation papers there and available. Chipley chaired the meeting. I was elected president at that meeting and left Useppa as first president of the Hyacinth Control Society. Don Seaman, who was a representative of the same lab, the USDA lab in Fort Lauderdale, as Bob Blackburn, we conned into being one of the signing members. So we had representation from the United States Department of Agriculture. Actually, about 6 months later, Bob told you he got transferred to California, so we were instantly a nationwide organization. We had a board member in the state of California. Well, that fall, I was still getting encouragement to go to the Weed Society of America meeting. I guess it's now the Weed Science Society of America. They've done the same thing we did. They've added good things to the name. I went to St. Louis to a meeting of the Weed Society of America. And 2 or 3 things happened. I learned 2 or 3 things there. First place, I found out it really was a big meeting. It was a 5-day meeting, Monday through Friday, 5 full days, 3 or 4 concurrent sessions, all day, every day. Lots and lots and lots of people. The aquatic section was about 1/2 of one afternoon. I don't know everything that happened. I was interested. I listened to all the papers as best I could. There were 2 things that I remember. There's a fella that gave a paper on cattails, the life cycle of cattails. I want to tell you right now, he knew about cattails. He knew all about cattails. Well, cattails were a concern to me. I was back here in Lee County digging ditches for mosquito control, and as soon as we dig them, they fill up full of cattails. And so I said, hey, I got an opportunity to learn something. I raised my hand. I said, how deep have I got to keep water in my canal so that they won't grow cattails? He had not the slightest idea. Cattails, control of cattails, were not his concern. None. He had no interest in controlling them. He just knew about them. The other fella gave a paper on chemical control of aquatic weeds with about a dozen different herbicides. I don't remember what they were, but he enumerated them. He said, this one gives 98% control, you can get 96% control with this one does 93% control, and he stopped. And I said, well, so what's the relative cost on these? He said, cost was not a part of our study. Well, when you're in business of trying to do control, as you know, price needs to be a part of your study. And so what I found out very quickly was that at least at that time, at the Weed Society of America meeting, in the aquatic section, papers were being given by research people for the benefit of other research people. They weren't being given for people who were interested in control of aquatic weeds. They just weren't. And so I decided we were on the right track with an association. But before the meeting was over, I got cornered in the lobby of the hotel by Dr. Bill Ennis. He was president of Weed Society of America. And I want to tell you right now, he was abrupt with me. He told me in no uncertain terms that I had no idea what we were getting into. He told me I was wasting my time. He told me that the Weed Society of America didn't need a splinter group that was going off to form another association. He told me that the Weed Control Society, Aquatic Weed Control Society up in the Midwest, was all but dead, would be dead within a year or two. And they were. But he said, you're going to spin your wheels for 1 or 2 or 3 or at the most 5 years, and this is going to die, and you will have wasted all this time. A lot of money. You should stay with the Weed Society of America. Ultimately, he came down and took over the lab and became Bob Blackburn's boss. And I'll tell you right now, he wasn't thrilled with this group. But Don Seaman was already ensconced in California as our Western board member. 6 months later, we had 150 people, primarily mosquito-controlled people that we recruited. We simply grabbed people that we had a little control over and got them to the meeting. And most of them had an interest because mosquitoes, mosquito control and aquatic weed control generally should go hand in glove if they're not. And so we put about 150 people together to a meeting at the Governor's Club in Fort Lauderdale. Those of you who were there, where's John? John Gallagher was there. You were there, John. That was, and I want to tell you right now, we did it right. We dressed the board of directors and the officers of the association in white dinner jackets at the banquet. We made water hyacinth corsages for the women. My wife told me on the way out here those corsages had all turned black before the banquet was over. But we were on our way. And 35 years later, here we are. And I do have a paternalistic pride for the association. I think it served a useful purpose when I was active in control of aquatic weeds. I think it served a useful purpose for a great many members over the years. And rather than being a splinter group, I think this is really a good, solid, scientifically based, useful society, and I commend you for all the effort that you put into it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Wayne. Don, it's your program. There's probably, there's one thing that you always look at that you've not done. There's a person we've not asked to say, John, you got 2 or 3 minutes. Remember the Governor's Club for us? Comments at all? We've not asked you. Yeah, you got anything to say? Here's John. Here's your opportunity.
Just briefly.
Come on up, Jack. John's one of those individuals, he's done everything with society, and he's not only a member of the society, and he's such a part of our organization that we often kind of leave his philosophy towards the last, and he'll tell us now what's good and bad. Briefly.
Hey, I just put this out, somebody comes to take it out and forgot John, but realistically, one reminisces of the early days, because that was the time when we were a small group, I don't know, 60, 70 people, we could go in and we gradually got to a size where we could fill up maybe a Holiday Inn. But the meetings were active. We argued, we did that. But the evenings were spent by the pool with the music group. That's one thing I miss. I went through the trials and tribulation of the changes. I also went through the difficulty of the loss of life. But the society hung on and stayed with us. Stayed with us. And I'm sorry for getting emotional. I enjoyed every bit. I look forward to coming again and being part of this. So, God bless you all.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, down as they can. All right, cheese, everybody.